Alright everyone, listen up. We've got a big job ahead of us, and I'm going to need everyone to do their part. You may remember that we previously reviewed Sly Cooper and the Thievius Racconus. I'm very happy with the work we did there. We played a good game, picked it apart, and had a lot of fun along the way. But that was just the prelude. Our next target is Sly 2 Band of Thieves. And if we're going to do this right, everyone needs to be on the top of their game. If memory serves, Sly 2 is a much bigger game than the first. We're going to need to divide and conquer if we want to succeed. Firstly, I need you to be our hands on the controller. If I've done my maths right, and I always do my maths right, there should be 8 episodes we need to beat to reach the end of the game. If you can complete each mission and find all the collectibles, we'll be well on our way. Meanwhile, as you're playing the game, you'll need to take in our surroundings, keep an eye on the environments and architecture, and also keep an ear out for the soundtrack. We'll also need some info on the story and characters. It's a lot, but try to take in as much as you can. As for me, I'll be on scribing duty. I'll make notes based on the data you collect throughout the game and turn it into a script. If everything goes according to plan, we should have Sly 2 Band of Thieves reviewed before the night is over. It won't be easy, but if we focus and work as a team, we'll have this in the bag. Alright, let's move out! Sly Cooper and the Thievius Racconus was a great game, and one I have a strong personal connection to. It all started with my days as a thief in primary school, a life from which I eventually retired, even though I never lost the urge. On my first visit to England, my thirst for stealing was quenched by a PS2 demo disc that contained, among other things, a demo for Sly Raccoon, the PAL region name for Sly Cooper and the Thievius Racconus. It introduced me to a series of video games that allowed me to fulfill my ultimate childhood dream, pulling off elaborate and ridiculous heists and becoming an honourable gentleman thief. Something that is a lot harder to do in real life than it seems. The Sly Cooper series saved me from a lot of jail time. Not that I'm clever enough to pull off that sort of thing, I can't figure out how to turn the heater on in my car. The point is, the Sly Cooper series really spoke to me. But my thieving days are behind me now. Can this series still deliver? Let's continue that investigation with Sly 2 Band of Thieves. The game begins in the Museum of Natural History in Cairo. It's not just the birthplace of a world of knowledge, it's also the birthplace of the beginning of Sly 2. And it may also be the birthplace of an unexpectedly eager to erupt baby. Quickly searching baby porn in museum has yielded no results, but I'm sure it's happened somewhere, and I reckon there's no better museum to give birth in than the Museum of Natural History in Cairo. Quickly searching Museum of Natural History in Cairo will reveal that it's not a real museum, which has been a real slap in the face to everything I just said, and has also revealed that this tangent has been a complete waste of time, and I should probably go back to talking about the game. Sly, Bentley, and Murray, who has disguised his true identity under his new, very clever and discreet moniker, The Murray, have all broken into the museum to steal the clockwork parts. But when Inspector Carmelita Fox and her mysterious companion Constable Neela burst out from some dusty old coffins, the Cooper gang discovers that the clockwork parts have already been stolen, and would you believe, not by them. Amid Sly's confusion and Carmelita's excitement, Neela suggests that the culprits may have actually been the Claw Gang. Which is not how you spell that word, by the way. It's at this point where Sly makes a daring and destructive escape from Carmelita. With their only lead being Neela's mention of the Claw Gang, the Cooper Gang set out to find its members and steal back the clockwork parts. I personally don't understand why this is such a big deal. Like, I get that the parts could potentially be reassembled to bring clockwork back to life, but it's not like it's something that's likely to happen. If it was a genuine threat, I don't think Sly would have waited 2 whole years before deciding he should probably round up the clockwork parts. And also, I don't know a lot about robots, but I'm pretty sure it takes a little more than just putting all the pieces together to bring them to life. They're not like IKEA furniture. Robots are very complicated. That's why they will one day eradicate the human race. I suppose Sly wants to be certain that Clockwork has no chance of returning, and that's why he's going to so much effort. So, the gang heads to Paris to take back the first of the clockwork parts in Episode 1, The Black Chateau. One thing the first Sly game was really good at was its storytelling and characters. For each of its episodes, it would set up its villain by introducing their character and their role in the story, and then drop you into their levels, where you're amped up to take them down. In Sly 2, they do that, but better. They introduce the villain, their backstory, their motives, what their scheme is, and how their clockwork parts fit into that. And there are some really great characters. Dimitri is incredible simply because he's a greasy sweet bundle of madness, and I really like the Contessa as well. But the reason Sly 2 is better at this is because everything is linked. Not only do all the different characters interact with each other, showing off their personalities and progressing the story with all sorts of twists and turns, but the characters are actually up to something. In the first game, the Fiendish Five didn't really work together. They each had their own individual schemes going on that didn't relate to anything the others were doing, which was fine, but I felt like there was a disconnect between each of the Fiendish Five members. The Claw Gang, on the other hand, work closely with each other. They communicate with each other and appear in each other's episodes. They share the clockwork parts between them and each use them to assist in the gang's overall scheme, which mainly revolved around illegal spice. Rajan made the spice, Jean Bisson distributed the spice, Dimitri and the Contessa used the spice, and Arpeggio orchestrated the whole thing. There's a whole operation going on that you're disrupting more and more as the game goes on, which I love. And it all starts in Paris, France, where the Cooper gang tries to steal the clockwork tail feathers from the Claw gang's very own heartthrob artist-turned-nightclub owner, Dimitri Losteau. Upon being dropped in Paris, it becomes very obvious very quickly that Sly 2 is taking a different approach to the first game. The first game was very linear. Each episode had its own hub world, but the majority of the game took place in linear levels where the goal was to reach the end and collect the treasure key. It was a very simplistic, focused approach to a 3D platformer, and it works. I had no problems with it. Sly 2 is borderline unrecognizable compared to that. Each episode in Sly 2 takes place in one big level, filled with enemies and collectibles and rooftops and hiding places and searchlights and environmental features upon which stealthy maneuvers may be taken. And in these giant levels, Sly and the gang take part in various missions, each featuring unique objectives, all in an effort to prepare for their heist to take back that episode's respective clockwork part. It's a pretty massive departure from what the first game had established, and I was caught off guard by it the first time I played this game, but going into it this time, I was really keen for it. It's a matter of opinion, of course, but I think Sly 2's approach is much better. At the start of each episode, I would go around and collect all 30 clue bottles, in part because collecting things makes me feel all tingly-wingly, but also in part because it would help me familiarise myself with these giant levels and learn how to traverse them without getting caught by the guards. I feel like these bigger levels encourage stealth a lot more, which is great because that's Sly's whole deal. The first game did also encourage stealth, but it wasn't so much a stealth platformer as a stealth-themed platformer. You were encouraged to avoid searchlights and lasers and enemies, but they were effectively just level hazards. There wasn't a lot of room for flexibility in how you approach a platforming challenge, you just had to get through it, which, in essence, is the same as most linear platformers. Sly 2's formula basically forces you to be stealthy and think on your feet. Guards are a lot stronger in this game, they take more hits, they call for reinforcements, and they can quite easily kill you if you're not careful. So you need to avoid them. And this is where the openness of this game's levels make the stealth aspect so much more fun. Are there a lot of guards concentrated in a particular area? You might like to climb to the rooftops and avoid them. See a guard with something shiny in his pocket? Sneak around behind him and pickpocket him. You have a lot of flexibility, and there are so many ways for you to get from A to B. You feel a lot more like a sneaky thief in this sort of environment, which is why I think this approach works better. But there's more to this game than running around a big stealth-friendly playground. The Cooper gang's got shit to do, and they take the form of missions. Unlike the levels in the first Sly game, Sly 2's missions all often involve completing a unique objective somewhere within the main level. There are some missions that take you to a separate, smaller location, which is a fun little detour, but most take place in the giant level you explore for the duration of each episode. For most of these missions you'll be playing as Sly, the gaming industry's suavest and sexiest raccoon. Sly carries over a lot of his abilities from the first game. He's got his standard running and jumping, he can hit things with his cane, but most importantly, he can still jump and press the circle button to pull off exciting thief moves such as climbing poles, walking on tight ropes, swinging from hooks, ninja spire jumps, and any other thief move you can think of. In addition to that, he also has some new moves to play with. He can pickpocket enemies for coins and trinkets, he can perform stealth attacks, and he can sprint. Something he did automatically in the first game, but remember, greater emphasis on stealth. What kind of thief charges into a situation at full speed like that? A stupid thief, that's who. Sly has a lot of useful abilities that you can really make the most of in these open levels, and he's very fun to play as. But he's not the only member of the Cooper gang. In Sly 2, you also get to play as the two characters who aren't quite important enough to get a mention in the game's title, Bentley and Murray. These two play very differently to Sly. Bentley is the brains of the operation, but unfortunately he doesn't have the physical abilities to match Sly out in the field. Instead, he relies on his own tools. He has sleep darts that can put most enemies to sleep, and he has bombs so he can blow his enemies to bits. Murray, on the other hand, is the brawn. He's the strongest of the three, and he excels at anything and everything related to beating the absolute shit out of something. Between Sly, Bentley, and Murray, you'll be tasked with completing all sorts of missions with various objectives. A mission might require Sly to go around pickpocketing keys. It might require Bentley to lure a target to a specific location. It might require Murray to destroy something. It might require Sly to complete an intricate set of platforming challenges without being seen. It might require Bentley to use traps to defend himself from enemies. It might require Murray to destroy something. What I was really impressed by was just how many unique objectives the missions have. They really push the limits and make the most of each character's abilities. They feel so simple as playable characters, but you'd be amazed at how many different ways they put their capabilities to use, and in ways you would never expect. To add to this, you can even expand their arsenal using ThiefNet. As you're playing the game, you'll earn coins, either by destroying things or by selling any goodies you find out in the field. You can use these coins to buy all sorts of gadgets for each character on ThiefNet. They can make your attack stronger, they can have certain effects on enemies such as making them fight each other, they can distract and lure enemies away from places, they can give you more mobility options. There's a lot. You even get rewarded with extra ones for opening each episode's vault once you find all the clue bottles. There are so many different gadgets that I was admittedly overwhelmed by them and ended up not using most of them for the duration of my playthrough. Between them, Sly, Bentley and Murray are capable of a surprising amount. It's almost disgusting to see playable characters with this much potential and demonstrate it with a wide variety of missions, yet not stray too far away from the platforming focus of the game. It makes a lot of other games look really lazy, which is kind of unfair. The only problem I have is with Bentley and Murray. They're fun to play as, but they're not as fun to play as Sly is. When playing the game, you can very clearly see that each level is designed with Sly in mind. They're built perfectly to make the most of his abilities. But of course, Bentley and Murray don't have those abilities, so when you're required to take them out into the field for a mission, it can be a struggle. Because they aren't as flexible and mobile, they're more likely to get caught by guards, they're more likely to get cornered, they're more likely to struggle reaching a particular area in each level because they have fewer options to get there. And that does suck a bit of joy out of it. Pretty much all the time, I only wanted to play as Sly because he's naturally much better at traversal than they are. But that's my only gripe with Bentley and Murray. Beyond that, I think they're great. What I did notice throughout playing Sly 2 is that there were quite a few vehicles and gimmick playstyles. Now normally, like a fervent coprophiliac, that shit gets on my tits. When games shoehorn in random ass vehicles for no good reason other than to fill space, I tend to get a bit annoyed by it, because it's never going to be better than the normal gameplay, so why bother? There are a lot of games that come to mind with this. Spyro Year of the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex are pretty good examples, and even the first Sly game was guilty of it too to an extent, although not quite as offensively intrusive as the other examples I just listed. Sly 2 has all sorts of things. Some appear frequently, like Bentley's hacking and his RC chopper, some not so much, like Sly's dancing and Murray's tank. You would think that this would piss me off here as well, but weirdly, it doesn't. Partially I think it's because none of them are especially bad, and while they do appear often, they are still vastly outnumbered by the regular missions. This game has a ridiculous amount of missions, it's about 70 I think, and of them I want to say, as a rough guess, maybe 20% involve some kind of alternate gameplay style, so a decent sized chunk, but not so much that it's intrusive and gets in the way. But mainly, I think I'm okay with them because they make sense. They have a good reason to be there. What Sly 2 does really well is making the missions feel like they're relevant to what's going on. A lot of platformers don't bother to do this. Their levels just serve as a vessel for platforming without having too much of an impact on the narrative. But in Sly 2, they all have an impact. Each episode in Sly 2 focuses on the gang gathering intel and completing tasks to set up for the big heist at the end, where they try to steal that episode's respective clockwork part. It's all building to something, you're working towards a final goal, and for some of those missions, having vehicles makes sense. Sly, Bentley and Murray aren't going to be able to destroy a dam on their own, so it makes sense to use a turret to do it. Murray isn't going to be able to destroy a tank with his bare hands, so it makes sense for him to use his own tank to do it. I think because it contextually makes sense for these vehicles and gimmicks to be there, I'm alright with them. They're justified. What I also love about the missions is that they have tangible effects on the levels. I noticed this in a Tangled Web. Once you complete the mission that causes Neela to hire some planes, those planes are present in the level from then on. Similarly, in He Who Tames the Iron Horse, there's a mission where Murray is captured by Carmelita. Once that mission is over, Carmelita remains as a feature of the level. She's not relevant from that point forward, but she's still there, wandering around and shooting random innocent strangers on the street, just as any police officer would. It makes you feel like the missions you're doing actually mean something, especially when it all culminates in the final operation at the end of each episode. I love it when a plan comes together. What really helps it as well is the presentation. It carries over a similar visual style from the first game, with everything looking fittingly cartoony and wacky. but I think because you spend so much time in the main levels, the presentation makes a stronger impression. You feel more of a connection with the locations because you're in them a lot, and that connection is strengthened by the context of the story. Jailbreak, for example, really stuck out to me. You start that episode with Bentley on his own because Sly and Murray have been arrested. Bentley being on his own, combined with the gothic architecture of the Contessa's prison, the blood-red sky, and the eerie, ominous, tense music, makes for a pretty unforgettable atmosphere. There are some visual errors in the game because I'm playing the HD collection version, things like letterboxing and splash screens not being wide enough to cover the whole screen, but that's not too big of a deal. I can look past that, literally. The music I think has really improved as well. The first game's soundtrack was great, but it lacked distinct, memorable melodies. Sly 2 remedies that with some very memorable themes that you can hum along to as you're looking for clue bottles. And how could I not mention Dimitri's nightclub theme? Holy shit. If you were to turn an orgasm into a song, that song would be it. It's got the juice. And the story as well. It was pretty outrageous with what the Claw Gang was trying to do, but it did a really great job of involving all these unique characters with different character motives, tying all of their individual schemes and plans together under one big overarching story of the Cooper Gang trying to recover the clockwork parts. From a pure narrative standpoint, I mean, it wouldn't have been a New York Times bestseller, but it was pretty good. Until right at the end! They were doing so well until the final episode. The characters were fulfilling their roles. Neela and the Contessa pulled the rug out from under us by betraying the Cooper Gang. Then there was another rug pull. The Contessa, Interpol's prison warden, was actually a secret Claw Gang member, and that was great. I loved that. That, to me, made the Contessa a really interesting character. But then, things got a little out of control. In Anatomy for Disaster, there are 3 more rug pulls. Neela reveals she was a secret Claw Gang member as well. Then, Arpeggio reveals that he ordered Neela to intentionally plant the seeds of the Cooper Gang going after the Claw Gang way back at the beginning in Cairo, and that all along he wanted to use the clockwork parts to create a body that would make him strong and immortal. Now those twists, I'm okay with. That would have been fine. What I'm not okay with is the final rug pull where at the very last second, Neela betrays Arpeggio and takes Clockwork's body for herself. And I don't understand why. Clockla is fucking stupid. Even the name is stupid. Why does Neela want to become Clockwork? What's her motive? She's present throughout the whole game, but she's the only character who isn't fleshed out at all. No one knows who she is. Arpeggio had the backstory. Arpeggio had the motive. Arpeggio was the leader of the Claw Gang, orchestrating the whole thing. He should have been the one to become Clockwork. Instead, he was killed by Clockla after a grand total of, 4 minutes of screen time? If that? Wasted potential, really. I really feel like they should have done something else with Neela. Maybe it should have been that Arpeggio betrays Neela somehow, setting her up for a redemption arc and having her help the Cooper Gang take down Clockpeggio. Or something. That would have made more sense, but no. A random-ass pink tiger with no motive, no backstory, and a terrible fake British accent gets to undeservedly hog the game's finale. Besides that though, I really like the story. Even with the excessive rug pulls, it's a better story than what you'll find in most platformers, I guarantee it. One other thing I noticed while playing this game is, it's fucking long. Most platformers, if you play them non-stop, you can expect to beat in around 5 hours, give or take 1 or 2. At least most of the ones I've played are like that. Sly 2 though, it's a massive game. There are 8 episodes, and they take about an hour or 2 to beat each. That's easily over 10 hours. I looked it up, and speedruns of this game take about 5 hours. If you go as fast as is humanly possible, it's about the same length as your average platformer, which is nuts. I didn't mind the length at all because I had so much fun with the gameplay, and I would have happily played it for days. But I can see how it might be an issue for some. I can imagine people getting burned out by it, and also not everyone can set aside that much time to beat the game. Would you believe some people have lives? So that is a potential negative for some people, the concept of time. It's slipping through our fingers, and not everyone wants to spend over 10 hours of what little time we have as a raccoon. But overall, I can't complain. Of all the games I've reviewed, Sly 2 Band of Thieves has been one of the most fun to barrel through. It just has so much going for it. It has fun gameplay with some very well designed levels and a lot of unique and varied missions. It has great characters and an amazing story, if you choose to forget about the abomination that is Clockla, and it was well presented as well. The soundtrack in particular stood out to me as being memorable and well suited to their environments. Even things I would normally consider negatives, like weird alternate gameplay styles, I felt the game did pretty well. And on top of all that, it's a massive game. It'll take time for you to get through it, so you're getting plenty of bang for your buck. I can't really be mad. After you've beaten the game, at the end of the credits, you receive a message directly from the developers themselves. Okay, that's it. You've seen everything, you won. Go outside. Alright, let's do it. Let's go outside. So I'm currently outside in the backyard, which is kind of like a front yard that's out the back of the house, so no one can see it. It's actually not that bad out here. It's a sunny day. It is kind of windy, and there are police sirens going on in the background, so I'm assuming someone got stabbed, but you know, that happens sometimes. You just gotta make do with your situation. It is spring. Well, it's not spring yet, but it'll be spring soon. And I think nature is sort of ready for it, because everything does vaguely smell of cum. Because that's what happens, like the trees are like pollinated. It's not because I've spunked on the foliage. Yeah, it's all right out here. There's not much to do though. I could go for a walk, but my backyard's not very big, so it would take maybe... I mean, I could go for a walk, but like, you know, it won't take very... It would take about like 15 seconds. So not the best use of my time. I mean, yeah, I think I'm going to go back inside now. You know, it was fun while it lasted, but there's just not much going on. So, yeah. I guess that's it.